Well, we're off on a new adventure. So what else is new?
Here we go.
We're ghost tracking again.
This is fun.
You've seen on the channel, sometimes we go ghost tracking. But this time we're ghost tracking a railroad that is probably more ghost tracked than any railroad has ever been ghost tracked. There's the grade.
There's the grade.
Right over there.
Yep.
And it's the grade of the Rio Grande Southern.
Nice.
And we are just now pouring
it?
We're pouring Dolores, Colorado. If you know the Rio Grande Southern, you know why we're pulling into Dolores. This was a major stop and a really cool place on the Rio Grande Southern. So check this out.
No kidding.
Welcome to Dolores and the Rio Grande Southern.
Nice.
The Rio Grande Southern connected the Denver and Rio Grande Western at Durango to the Denver and Rio Grande Western at Ridgeway by going directly over the mountains instead of around the mountains. This was not done to cut down the mileage, but rather to access the incredibly lucrative silver mines up in the San Juan Mountains. The Dolores Depot has been restored and it's looking pretty darn good. It's typical of the depots that were found on the Rio Grande Southern. They were all quite similar. And they've gotten a hold of a galloping goose and restored that to operating condition. The Rio Grande Southern built 7 of these things. They called them a galloping goose because of the funny way the back end sort of bounced up and down as it was moving down the track. Number 5 here has been rather painstakingly restored. It's taken around to events where it can be run as there's no track here in Dolores. While lots of railroads had some kind of rail buses, the Rio Grande Southern was well known for its rail buses, the galloping geese. They were built during the Depression in an effort to keep this incredibly marginal railroad operating. The Rio Grande Southern was built by Otto Mears here on the right. That's Chief O-Ray on the left. Otto Mears was best known for building railroads and even this wagon road in places where most people said no road should ever be built. But it sort of became Otto Mears' stock in trade, figuring out how to get railroads through some of the most unlikely mountain passes, which makes them really fun railroads to explore. So we're actually driving on the grade of the Rio Grande Southern here.
Wow.
And we're just pulling into Rico.
That is cool. What a trip.
I mean, Rico, that's just such a place in the history of railroading and narrow gauge and model railroading. I think the Rico Depot up here has been the most model depot in the history of depots. But there it is. There's Rico right there. One of the really great things about the Rio Grande Southern is the sheer beauty of the scenery that it traveled through, and that makes exploring it even more rewarding. Rico here was a silver mining town up in the mountains. This was the site of the Rico station, long gone now, but almost exactly like the depot down at Dolores. As the trains came up from Durango, Rico was the first real mining town that they came to. Now, the water tank does survive here at Rico. It's the last of the railroad artifacts still surviving here at Rico. And fortunately, it has been preserved so that it doesn't end up like a lot of the things here at Rico. For example, the depot, which is completely gone. But what an absolutely beautiful location up in the mountains here, and the grade in most places is really drivable. And from Rico, it was all uphill to the high point on the line. Okay, so this is Lizard Head Pass.
Wow. This is up
Just
high.
amazing. Yeah,
It's like really
gasping
hard to
for
breathe.
breath
Yeah,
up here.
no kidding.
But they've got the grade marked here.
Yeah, there's galloping.
There's a
geese.
galloping goose and a U.S. Forest Service map, but we're actually driving on the grade, and the Y was somewhere right over here. with the snow sheds, and this was the summit.
Right.
After it left Rico, it climbed up into here, and they could cut out helper engines and whatnot that they had coming up the hills on both sides of this thing.
Wow.
I think the more severe grades are below us here.
Uh-huh. Oh, you can see where it went around the bend.
Yeah. But this is the grade. This
Right
is
here. Yes, yes.
Lizard Head right here. Now this rock outcrop here is the actual Lizard Head for which the pass was named. This was the high point of the line at 10,222 feet in elevation. So even coming up here as a passenger was sort of a noteworthy achievement, and yes, snow removal was a problem as well. The grades are really easy to find. In fact, they've been marked by the Forest Service with little pictures of a galloping goose. Not much up here. This is what's left of the water tank, surprisingly. But the grades are here, even if all of the other artifacts are long gone. But it's a really popular activity to drive the grades up here. As you can see, they're just pretty much public roads and very accessible. This is Trout Lake below Lizard Head, and down here the water tank is still in. It has been preserved to some extent, not as well as the one at Rico, but preserved nonetheless. And the last of the Rio Grande Southern trestles is here as well. There used to be dozens of these things, and even when I first started exploring this railroad in the 1980s, there were a bunch of them still surviving. At this point, this is the only one left here at Trout Lake. At this point, the railroad starts the amazing descent down the Ophir Loop. A lot of the grade is still here, and look, there's still ties on a lot of it. This is the line that Otto Mears built down the side of this canyon called the Ophir Loop. He succeeded in losing elevation by building dozens of trestles and cuts into the side of the hill, looping back and forth until he got to the bottom of the canyon. This is Ophir at the middle of the loop. There's a little mining town here called Ophir. As you can see, there never really was much to Ophir, but hey, there was a mine here, and so there was a little town as well. And a little bit of the town survives. Most of it's gone, but a few structures still remain. At the bottom of the Ophir Loop is Telluride. Now there's a little dead-end track that goes up the box canyon that holds Telluride. Telluride was the big mining district here with lots of very wealthy silver mines. Telluride might very well be the reason Otto Mears built the railroad in the first place. This was where the real wealth was located, in the silver mines of Telluride. And the wealth is still here in Telluride. This is the old Telluride depot, still standing. Today the wealth comes from the resort community and the skiing here in the area. Well, so here we are arriving in Ridgeway.
Oh, wow, what a town.
We've made it.
We did.
We've made it over the Rio Grande Southern, all the way from Durango now to Ridgeway.
What a mountain pass. Wow.
Is that amazing?
That is wonderful.
Otto Mears was nuts.
Well, a lot of great inventors were.
I guess so. Well, anyway, there's a great little railroad museum here, and the old depot's here, and some cool stuff to see here, so we're going to scope that out.
Right.
Cool. Well, at Ridgeway, the Rio Grande Southern reconnected with the Denver and Rio Grande Western. Notice that the depot still stands, even though it's somebody's house. And there's yet another galloping goose here. This is Goose 1. This is not a restoration, this is a recreation. Goose 1 was scrapped out and they rebuilt it. Goose 1 was the only goose to be scrapped out, and so what that means is they can now get all of the geese together in one giant gaggle occasionally. There's this nice little museum here at Ridgeway. Notice that most of the equipment is Denver and Rio Grande Western. Most of the equipment that ran on the Rio Grande Southern was ex-Denver and Rio Grande Western equipment. The Rio Grande Southern was sort of like the bankrupt stepchild of the Denver and Rio Grande Western. The Rio Grande Western operated the Rio Grande Southern for most of its life as it went through various forms of bankruptcy. The railroad was abandoned in 1952, but not in the hearts and minds of rail fans, where it still lives on. Well, so that is the Rio Grande Southern.
What a journey. Wow.
That was fun. Can you imagine just riding that thing in a goose or a passenger train?
Like even in a car.
Yeah.
I mean, just looking over the edge at some of those precarious places where the railroad would have been perched. Oh my.
It's just incredible. Beautiful, beautiful line. But almost unfathomable that Otto Mears decided to build a railroad up there in the first place.
No kidding.
But he did.
He did it.
And there it is. That was really cool. Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, you should scope out the channel. You can do that by just clicking on the rocket ship logo if you're not in full screen. That takes you to the channel. Or when the blue button pops in any second now, you can click on that, and that will subscribe you to the channel and take you to the channel. If you've already subscribed, it'll just take you to the channel because you've already subscribed. And over there, of course, you can find 100 more movies that are equally fun and frivolous and just goofy fun stuff to look at.
Right.
Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we'll see you here again in 1 week with some more significant and informative and educational screwing around. See you then. Bye.